Morena koutou, councillors. Welcome to day 2 of our hearings. Can I ask Councillor Defoe to open our meeting with a karakia, please?
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair, tēnā tātou I raro te mana ki tanga o tō tātanei wāhi I tō tātanei kaunihira I te atanei. Tēnā koe, kataraina nau mai hoki mai tō hararei whakahaere I te tāwahi, nō reira nau mai piki mai hara mai, you're coming back to major business I nai nei. Nō reira tēnā koe e te tuahine. Tēnā tātou, kia hiri tātou. Kia tau te rangi māni o rangi nui e tūi honei o papatūnuku e takoto nei, o te tai au e awhi nei, ki rungi a mātou o toi moana e tau nei, ti hei mauri ora. May the peace of the sky above and the earth below as we of Toi Moana embrace the universe and its surroundings upon us, behold, it is life. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora no councillors. Please note that as per Standing Orders 14.3, I will vacate the chair to enable Deputy Chair Dougal to chair today's hearings. By formally doing so, I will be able to proceed and participate in the hearings while not chairing. Kia koe, Glenn.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair McDonald. Councillor Defoe, may I ask you for an opening karakia, please? Oh, just that, sorry. Apologies. So I'll remind all councillors and staff that this hearing is being live streamed and recorded, and that the recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I further remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the meeting that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. We have no apologies with the arrival of Councillor Shirley. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared for today's hearing that were not declared yesterday? There are none, so I'll proceed. The hearing of the submissions will now commence. So please refer to the latest hearing schedule that's on your desk so you know who will be speaking next. And can I remind councillors that this is an opportunity to listen, ask questions of submitters. It is not the time for debate, as this will take place during the deliberations next month. I also remind our submitters that this is a public and live stream meeting, and that your allocated time will be followed carefully. So without further ado, I'd like to warmly welcome our first submitter, Rowan Bennett. A very warm welcome back to Chambers. We're very looking forward to hearing your submission.
Just need to have the PowerPoint put up. This morning, councillors, we're submitting as Te Arawa Ki Tai Trust, the trust formed from the Makatu Rena Cleanup Committee. 2011, we were cleanup committee, and we decided to form an environmental trust. Following that, to really acknowledge the huge support we got from our Makatu community in that cleanup and the dedication they gave to cleaning up the coast. Though we did have a lot of support from around the bay generally. This is my colleague Kanahana Marsh, who works in the trust with. So I'll get into it. I've got the wrong glasses. Our full submission provides our analysis and rationale for our recommendations for amendments to the long-term plan and annual plan. In that submission, we've commented on asset protection, the financial strategy, proposed regional benefit fund, distributions, and the biodiversity question. But today we want to focus on the parts of our submission which highlight impacts and effects on tangata whenua. We think that there are inequities which persist in councils, planning and methodologies. And we think also it's time to address the imbalance. Councils shouldn't rest on its laurels. Councils, I've got to remind you, have evolved from colonial templates and need to keep on decolonising. So our core message is that tangata whenua carry the environmental and cultural impacts of council investments, while financial benefits are spread broadly across the wider community. So regional council manages a significant investment portfolio generated from resources within tangata whenua localities. However, that wealth didn't arise in isolation. It is directly linked to lands, waters and coastal environments of tangata whenua. And much of this development occurred when Māori had limited, actually none, decision-making power over their resources. So today we see a clear pattern: impacts borne locally by tangata whenua, benefits distributed region-wide, and that's not equitable. Next one. And of course, the prime example is the Port of Tauranga, which generates major financial returns for council, supports regional rates and investment, but dredging, reclamation and industrial activity impact Tauranga Moana. Those impacts are felt most directly by tangata whenua communities. These are not just environmental impacts. They are cultural, historical, intergenerational. So the whole region benefits from the wealth generated in tangata whenua environments, but tangata whenua disproportionately carry the cost. That is the imbalance we are asking council to address. So what needs to change is the question. We're not opposing investment, but we're saying investment must now include intentional redistribution of benefit. I've expanded on a lot of this in the fuller submission. And some of the things that should be taken into account when redistributing or setting a redistribution system should include tangata whenua own research and development initiatives, support Māori economic development, fund training and employment pathways, address communities experiencing deprivation remedies, and tangata whenua must be given a role in deciding on funding distribution, not just as stakeholders. And I think I need to point out that the deprivation remedies, while it might be all of Opotiki, and it's not all of Tauranga, but the Māori communities in Tauranga are all in that deprivation index. It's just that they're surrounded by wealthy others, but they're still the little red dots in Tauranga. So you'll get as many, for instance, in the deprivation index in Matapi as you get in Opotiki. So now I just want to go to the biodiversity question. And this is where the imbalance persists. So the question in the consultation doc asks, how does the council protect nature? And that is the wrong question. The question should be, how are ecosystems being restored in the face of ongoing degradation? So I want to talk to our experience in Makati, the reality on the ground. In Aotearoa, we are seeing declining pipi populations, smaller shellfish, disappearance of species, like they have disappeared. Just go to the next one. Stressed seagrass beds, continued pressure from freshwater allocation to kiwi fruit, mostly to kiwi fruit orchards. And these are not abstract issues, they directly affect mahinga kai, cultural identity of ahika, and ecosystem function. I recently presented to Waitangi Tribunal on the claim for Makatu estuary, and I had to convince them how much it hurts seeing the degradation. And I just want to end this part saying, well, for tangata whenua, biodiversity is not a project, it is identity, survival, and obligation. So the misalignment of investment. So council highlights, I'm just showing you what I think from Māori perspective, council isn't doing right. So in our area, you look at lizard monitoring, you know, so what? They've survived without our help, but a lot of money gets spent there. Pest control, there's a place for that. Planting initiatives, I recognise these have value, but it shouldn't be the only thing that you're funding. And I see in one of the earlier submissions someone has done, I think it might be Forest and Bird, point out that Regional Council only invests a small amount, something like 3% in biodiversity out of all its income. And I think that's shocking. Didn't know it was that bad. So these have value, but they do not address estuary collapse, shellfish decline, or catchment level degradation. So there's the mismatch for you. There's disconnect between funding priorities and lived environmental reality, and in that, tangata whenua values are ignored. So, is that the last one, is it? So it's a system problem. The issue is structural. Biodiversity funding is often agency-driven, species-focused, but ecosystems require whole of catchment restoration from mountains, rivers, estuaries to sea. Though in Makatu, we say from the sea, the estuaries, the rivers to the mountains, because that's the way the fish flows. Without that, we are managing symptoms, not causes. And we are also concerned that tangata whenua are not meaningfully involved in defining biodiversity priorities, identifying sites, allocating funding. This is still part of a top-down model where priorities are externally or systems defined and communities carry the consequences. And if you look at some of the funding that's allocated, Regional Council does this, funds exactly the same as DOG, as Western Bay, and a lot of other funders. So our trust experiences, yeah, this is our work. We're doing the work. We do seagrass monitoring, and these are with all of these without council funding. We do cultural flow assessments, paralytic shellfish poison monitoring, and we acknowledge Councillor Scrimger, who lets us cross on his property to take samples of the waterway. We deliver kaupapa Māori science education programs, and our program 2 years ago won the top prize at the Mātauranga Rotorua Fair. The only submission or application from the coast, and the kids got the top prize. Meanwhile, funding flows to groups with the least connection to these ecosystems. Kaupapa Māori approaches struggle to access support, and this isn't a capability issue, it's a system design issue. Showing some of the stuff that we do. So there's one of the schools that we use, the Kura or Maua, we give them experience. And we're quite, how shall I say? We don't waste our money. So we work with Cawthron Institute on paralytic shellfish poisoning, for instance. And so when the scientists come up, we use them and say, oh, we're going to take you up to the school and you can talk to kids. So it cost us nothing, and they actually enjoy the difference too. The other one there is showing monitoring of the Pongakawa River. So I just want to point out that ugly water take structure that's on the river. And the applicant said that nobody goes on the river now, so they did it. And I just sent him this picture with our kayak there. And there are the team doing monitoring the river. So I just want to conclude by saying the Regional Council's provided astute leadership in maximising the returns on its assets. But the protection of those assets have not been fully explored and remain vulnerable. And distribution of the returns on those assets are inequitable and lacking in due diligence. I'll point that out. Like there was a lot of investment in Opotiki, but there was no investment, or the investment didn't look at the social and social impacts. And so it never got the best out of that funding. Well intended, and I was part of that decision making, but well intended, but didn't hit the key purpose, which was providing jobs in the area. I think the Pūteo Rautaki financial strategy is not inclusive. The Regional Benefits Fund needs more work, and we're opposed to local council handouts. We don't think regional council should be the go-all for local councils. Biodiversity Council needs to move beyond agency-defined priorities and support community and tangata whenua-led ecosystem restoration. Move from a top-down environmental restoration policy program and ramp up the transference to community and ahika-led values. So everything Māori want for the environment is good for everybody. But Māori carry the history, the impacts, the responsibility to restore, and that creates an obligation on council. If we get this right, the Bay of Plenty can become a model for equitable, community-led ecosystem restoration. That's my submission on behalf of our trust.
Kia ora. Thank you, Rowan. Councillors, questions?
Kia ora, korua. Thank you very much for your excellent written submission and your presentation today. I wanted to query around one of the first points in your submission, which is around the risk of local government reform. And I wondered if you just wanted to speak a little bit more to that and the concerns that you have about that. So I gather it's particularly about losing iwi input, that with reforms, is that your particular?
Oh, the protection of assets is obviously a big issue for everybody. And I don't think Regional Council have got it right yet, the models they put up for protecting those assets. But those are assets that have come from the community, and they should be retained by the community. And you need to be careful of national government, because it's not as if they're new to taking resources and putting them somewhere else. And so that's really the thrust of that submission, part of the submission.
Right, thank you.
Councillor McMillan, then Chair McDonald, then Councillor Defoe.
Morena, thank
Morena.
you. Just wondering if you had a magic wand and a giant pot of money for the Makatu estuary with the whole of catchment restoration, what would you actually do? What would be a priority?
Glad you asked that question. Well, because I've got a whole lot of jobs, And it needs to start with a plan for restoration. So, you know, that we work through it methodically. But I don't know where you'd get the funding for that, and I'm hoping the treaty settlements will come up with it. But on my list of things, I've got the first thing is training the next generation on the history and management of the estuary and making them the estuary managers. So that would be atop the list. The big things are dealing with the biggest polluters of the estuary at present are farm drains, and one of them, well, two of them at least come through Taurawa Lakes Trust farms, and working on us as iwi, as Māori, to do our part. So one aspect of that is going to take 5 resource consents. That's coming through the Waitapuia drain or Singleton's gravity drain, because it's to do with whitebait, having access there. And we, in our opinion, we've been monitoring the seagrass. Every deluge, it just covers the seagrass again. The poor seagrass got to start all over again. Yeah. So I've got a list of jobs that need to be done. And I could soon, you know, use up any funds to help do that.
Oh, yeah, I'm not promising any money. I'm just wondering in terms of,
Yeah.
you know, retirement of wetlands, land use change, as you say, education, training, and all of those things, how that map looks in your mind for that catchment restoration.
So that's where I'd start, setting up
Papai.
a estuary, next generation estuary managers.
Papai, thank you.
Kia ora, Raywin. Thank you for your submission. I love it when you bring us challenges, and there were quite a few challenges in the submission. However, it's the right time to put the challenges before us, and there were a lot in there. And the first, I guess, they thought come to mind, well, in your view, because you've followed us and you follow us over the years looking at the progress. So really my 2 questions. How would you rate the progress currently being made by Regional Council, despite a lot of the concerns you've raised in the submission? And my second question will be around, you are fully aware of the challenges of Regional Council when it comes to working with Ngai Māori, with tangata whenua, and now with mana whenua. And given what we currently do at the moment and the challenges you put forward, and although you do provide some advice around how we can resolve that, would your expectation of our implementing what you have put down, what would be a reasonable time frame you would put on us to achieve some of that, if not all of that?
So the last time I was here, I said it's really important to kōrero, to bring it to the table and have councillors debate it. I mean, I think that's really necessary and as part of moving on. So it might be, I might want 6 steps forward, you might come out with 3, but you've debated it, everybody's been involved, and I'm happy, you know, I don't think you can ask for more. I think if everybody's had a chance to have their say and it's been debated, etc., that's good. Time frame? Next week? I just think it's, well, I don't know, it's election year and it must be, there's so much uncertainty. But I did make a submission on retaining councils, regional council. I think that followed Okeri's meeting, and we got good advice at that meeting. So it's hard to say, but I mean, I don't think some of the issues are that hard. Just needs to be brought back to the table and have the debate, put it on the list to be debated. But I do think that one of the urgent ones, because I know council has tried, is to fund kaupapa Māori projects. And that's where I'm saying that our values are different to mainstream. So I see a lot of our people tick mainstream boxes for the environmental issues, and I can understand that because they have a passion about the environment. But we deliberately don't do that because we're into restoring our kids' heritage, and their mātauranga Māori belongs to them. And if I come to council for funding, that becomes public information. You know, so there's some challenges there. And even with our kaupapa Māori science, we've got a good formula, and I'm not prepared to. You know, we don't get enough funding. A lot of it has to happen, but the funding has come from our own people, and I don't think that should be the case. I mean, there's an issue there.
Final question, Councillor Defoe.
Tēnā koe whaia o tērā koruatahi, he whakaroranga tērā tā koutou. Me tērā whakataua ki nā tōraurau, nā tapuraurau ka ora ai te iwi. Kia pua wai haere tērā kaupapa mā tātou. Nō reira ka nui te mihi kia korua. Thank you so much for your submission. And like Whaia Mati Moana said, I just wanted to say thank you for the clarification. Thank you for the wero, and thank you for the pathway of where we can do better. My first question is, on page 11 of your document that you submitted, there's a action point in regards to what does enforcement action doesn't appear to be insufficient. I just wanted a clarification on that one. That to
Okay.
get somebody. Yes.
My opinion, you need more enforcement. Like, I think people get away. They get away with a lot. I mean, when they do get taken to court, it happens. But you know, we shouldn't be experiencing all the sediment that comes down every rain and covers the seagrass, which I would think is a taonga species or species under threat. But we need 5 resource consents to protect something in the wetlands there. You know, just so, and I know council chooses to educate rather than take people to court to enforce rules. And I just think maybe you should ramp that up. I think it's inefficient. When I see what's happening with our waterways, especially, I'm looking at a resource consent now for water for kiwi fruit place, and the chap is consulting with me, and that's on behalf of the iwi that I do work for. And I said, I think this looks a bit, I'm not a hydrologist, this looks a bit suspicious. And I said, I think I'm going to have to refer this to our hydrologist, who's not from the Bay of Plenty, so it's got no conflict with council. And anyway, I got a price, and they said, oh, could you hold off because regional council will do a report. In the meantime, our hydrologist looked at that, and he's got a page full of things that need to be questioned. And so I'm thinking, well, I don't know this stuff. I've had to engage this hydrologist. Do I trust what council's doing then? That's just an example.
That's great, Whaia, because that allows us to identify another process that needs to happen before consents from mana whenua is identified. And I think those sort of comments that you just made have come from a few people already. So ngā mihi nui mō tēnā. The other part around it is that after just listening to you, kaitiaki has a huge part to play within the settlement of the kaupapa that you've submitted on. And there's a lot of matters that have arisen around the protection of whenua awa mai te rangi ki te whenua, mai te whenua ki te ngāhere, mai te ngāhere ki ngā waipuna ora. And so we're talking about the holistic Māori approach to kaitiakitanga. If there was one special thing that you could do within the space of the taiao, and that was your top priority in the whole world, and that wish was to be done, what would that be for you?
It would be to restore the pickles in the rivers.
Ngā koe te whaia, ngā mihi.
Thank you. What a wonderful way to end your submission. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair. I wanted to remind everybody that I made a declaration of a conflict of interest yesterday, but there's one bit of information that I didn't add, is that I'm still a sitting member on Bay Trust until June. So I did declare my Bay Trust, but not that I'm still active with Bay Trust until June.
To the chair, I actually Googled it yesterday, so it's in the minutes.
Des, would you like to make your way to our submission area? Very warm welcome to you. Just push the button to make it green to speak, and we're in your hands. Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou katoa. I'm here with the Ottawa 1C1B Trust, and in support actually of what I've just heard around the definitions around Indigenous biodiversity and how that funding's distributed. And that's pretty much why I've come to the table here. So I'll just go straight into the submission. So basically, the Indigenous biodiversity can be kind of set into various particular boxes of Western understanding, such as biodiversity, and I think there needs to be some policy development which would help with setting objectives around, especially how their pūtea, the funding is distributed, and that is obviously you got your alignment with legislation, but also the Te Ao Māori or the Māori kaupapa associated with indigeneity. So when we look at indigenous species, we also look at our whakapapa, which is our heritage values in connection with the environment. So I think that's important. And the other aspect to that is biodiversity, and that's where we're part of the bio in terms of Te Ao Māori with their kinship, stories of creation, through down to how we have utilised the natural resources on this in this taiao, in this environment. So Ottawa 1C1B is pretty much within the ranges of the Otane Wainuku to Papamoa ranges. It sits along the eastern side there, and I'm chair of that trust. It's at the end of Waitau Road, and in the past we've had good sponsorship and collaboration with councils to access funding for the likes of the bush being set aside as a special ecological area. So we got funding from regional and district councils to fence that off. Our riparian margins, and through the land management efforts, this was quite early in the piece, we were able to access what the funding for biodiversity management plan. So we've kind of fulfilled those aspects in terms of the natural physical resources on the block. But where we are kind of stumbling with is getting accessing resources to protect the heritage features, because it's the heritage features that are that hold the repository of the knowledge. So our heritage feature on our well, like I said, it's land that's been handed down to us, contains the past site of Otawa and various other significant sites, tuahu, which are kohatu, and evidence of occupation. So we'd like to see the, you might call it heritage, some connectivity to that. If I can give by way of explanation, is in our kōrero pūrākau and our whakapapa. So a recent example is our kura, our pūwhāriki, which is the total immersion unit which sits within Mangatapu kura. They compose waiata. Now these waiata and compositions form part of a repository of knowledge, of genealogy. And sometimes one way of delivering or imparting information is hikoi. So we took this particular school group to the past site, and then they performed the whakaeke, which was the entrance, and basically it was the whakapapa. And it's the first time I'd felt like that there, because usually things like that are reserved for the marae. And it's like a pātere, it's like a geography, people, time and place, and it's all that information all in once, and they've done all around the rangataua. Okay, and they started from our tupuna of the Te Arawa waka, Nani Tuhikura, who built his pā at Te Raiapapa at Mangatawa, called Maungamana, right up to down to Takakōpiri, up in Otawa there, and our connection over to Hauraki with Kahurere come to Parahaki, and that was the name of the whakaeke. So from there at Otawa, you come down to Kumaramaua, who had his main residence at the Paipai Kōwhatu below Kaiwhamaunga, up the Waitao there, and then Tahu Whakatiki, and then Hikapa. Hikapa was a chief of great mana and influence of that time, before and during the Battle of Kokowai, so in that period, and his part was Te Pāo Te Ariki, which is Mangatapu marae. So I'm kind of in my work years, because we've had that tornado there. Anyway, it's places like it's our natural resource places and our site significance that are intertwined with the whakapapa. But inherent in that, with the biodiversity, is Takakōpiri is known for his hunting knowledge and prowess. That's why Kahurere Moa probably met him. He was in his prime, and met him doing his thing at Pokemiro. And this is what we talk about with fire here. I was glad to listen to Whaia Raywin in terms of the tuku iho, handing on that taonga. And we need to invest in that process of indigeneity around our biodiversity, because it's not separate. Now, my koro, he grew up on kereru knowledge, and a lot of the sites that I was given, they're actually, I didn't translate the names, but they're very important because they tell the story of this landscape. If I was to do a presentation, I'd probably just tell you to move the curtains and just talk and give you what I see along that mountain range, which is the pātere, which you can visualize it. So the thing is, the point with their knowledge is that it was tried and tested. It was a living knowledge. They had to gather food, medicine, and the likes. And my uncle Baldy, who recently passed, shared with me some of these sites. And as we the late Awanui, he was very keen on Otawa, and you got to be careful on how you distribute this knowledge in a safe way. I suppose that, just talking about my particular relationship, was because being brought up in the environment around having the hikoi and being brought up around the hunting knowledge, I was able to go and have a look and be a I don't know if it's a kaitiaki, but be an eyes and ears for our environment to see how far things have been impacted. So there's a lot of degradation that's happened in the Otawa Hills to our kiriru. The kiriru have kind of started eating other things, and they're spreading like barberry and that around. But the kōrero around that mountains to the sea is at risk to like a BCA approach, where they're reintroducing new kōkako and engaging with other iwi to bring it into our rohe. And they're forgetting about the importance that we have to look after some of those remnant species. So I'm kind of going into the biodiversity aspects around some certain criteria, is that these cultural values need to be ticked. Because we're actually kind of in competition with a large community-led group. I'm not against them because I've actually worked with them, but it's the whakaaro. They don't share the same values about protecting that landscape. And yes, the kōkako was important, and the kiwi are important. The reason why they're there is actually we tunnelled on their behalf. Kaumātua from Te Arawa, Waitaha and Ranginui, Ngaitiahi and Ngaitirangi, Ngāti He tunnelled for the kōkako from Kaharoa and Ngāti Whare for the kiwi. So that was all done pre all these translocation strategies and that they're being developed over 20 years ago. And a lot of those processes can be appropriated and controlled by like government organisations if they're not having appropriate policy to be able to implement them. And what I'd seen, I'd been involved with Ngā Whenua Rahui since the 1993s with our Otani Wainuku block, is that some of that knowledge can get appropriated and gets taken away from those who are in control. One of those particular knowledge with the kōkako is, they call it acoustic anchoring. But I know our whanaunga up whānau Apa Nui there, at Ngā Pukeariki, they developed that because of their close association, knowing that kōkako within their catchments, just like whānau and hapu, have their own dialect. So that's why I was saying we've got to be careful with how that mātauranga is used, because it's all forgotten. I'm hearing, acoustic anchoring, and I said, that sounds like it was their mātauranga. So we're willing to share, but there becomes a point we need to draw the line in the sand and saying, oh no, you actually takahi the mana of our people and that mātauranga. So that's why
Thank you.
I'm kind of just rushing through like that and highlighting a few issues and why that biodiversity on the back of hearing Raywin's kōrero needs to have some more consideration around those particular values, because they come to light also not just in the tangible species aspect. They come to light when you're working in highly significant areas that are tapu. So there are a lot of unexplained things that happen in there. We've got explanations, but they're very intangible. And so there's also your health and safety risks when you do set up like environmental programs in areas that have high, I would say, spiritual value. And those protection mechanisms need to be put in place too, because that is another. I know it's not a biodiversity aspect, but biodiversity activities can transgress on those. And just, I want to give one last example with a block that was taken from our whānau or many of our whānau back in 1970 for the purposes of water catchment. The council was supposed to survey the cemetery that was there. It was one of the last cemeteries, and our people retreated after the wars that happened in here, and some of them couldn't come back, so they ended up there either from injuries and the results of dispossession of land. But these places still exist, and unfortunately they're at risk of being transgressed. So on the other foot, they're looking to be going through a public works process of first right of refusal with the offerback surplus lands. And in looking at that, access was a big thing why that was taken. But these accesses now, some of the accesses that are used like for the likes of these conservation purposes, there's kind of like an entitled right to go right through the Māori land blocks and right over these wāhi tapu. And I hear and see things that really shouldn't be happening. And that's because that the engagement and decision making, both at the operational level with policy and implementation, and the decision makers aren't informed. So that's why I just thought I'll come in here and just talk. It's my responsibility anyway as trustees to hand that whenua down in a better position than it was.
Thank you, Des. Yeah,
Yeah,
agree.
kia ora.
We have two questions, one from Councillor Defoe, one from Councillor McMillan.
Tēnā koe te rangatira o te raka mihi kau atu ki a Ngāti Hei o te rā o Waitaha. Me te pūrā koe tēnei te puke o tawa. Me te hononga a hei ki a tawa, me tōna pūkenga o i raro te whakatauaki o tō tātanei pāpā a Waitaha. Nā reira katika kamihi atu ki a koe. Me tērā o ngā pūrākau e whakakahane i a mātou i tēnei wā. Nō reira katika kamihi atu. Just acknowledging the mere fact of what Des has just spoken to us around the hononga and the actual whakapapa of Te Puke. And Te Puke, the full name of Te Puke o Tawa. So Tawa in its purity was one of the wahine that the Chief Hei before on the Arawa canoe, and he wanted Tawa to be with his son. And koina te pūtake, that's the narrative of where the kōrero that I've just listened to, Des came from. And I needed to acknowledge that because it's got quite a significant well-being essence around what kaitiaki looks like. My pātai e hoa. Do you think the biodiversity funding purposefully fills the aspirations of your iwi, your hapu, your whānau?
Oh, no, not yet. That's what I was saying. It requires more. Like we're requesting pūtea. I mean, I'm prepared, and a few others will be prepared to work with policy developers and donate our time and expertise into trying to augment and align that to suit these values. I'm sure. Like Whai Raywin's got governance and operational experience, as well as the Taonga Tuku Iho responsibility.
Does the Trust have any data or collection of data of the voluntary hours that you continue to do within the Trust and on the land blocks that are significantly adjacent to biodiversity?
Haven't been taking that particular data with Otawa Trust, but more or less the land's been open to, we've hosted like wānanga from Aotearoa, wānanga Aotearoa, reo wānanga, our own hapu wānanga, schools. So it's open into that capacity. But when the kids ask things like where's the kereru, and we're telling them all these stories, it actually gives us biodiversity objectives to look, why don't we just, because why the kereru, we're kind of hunted and all that, because they look after and they propagate their own whare. They actually look after the bush and they're making sure it's generating. So I think with more careful consideration in terms of what that may look like in terms of, your basic biodiversity elements, plant pest control, fencing and all that, I think it can be quantified in that way. But we haven't just taken any there's no site visitor registrar. It's just been all word of mouth and hikoi based. Yeah.
Tēnā koe hoa. For you, the chair, I just want to see if one of our staff members can actually get a book handed to him in regards to some of the funding that's available through the Bay Plenty Regional Council that can actually support the trust through some of their applications until they get their mahi on the floor going. So E te whanaunga nei ra te mihi mai te aroa waka, mai te tākere o te wako o te aroa o Rotorua Nui a Kahumata Momoi. Nei ra te mihi ki a koe me tō kōrero i te rā nei. Nō reira, tēnā koe. I'll hand it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor
Kia
Defoe. That action point has been noted. Councillor McMillan, then Chair McDonald.
Koe, there's ngā mihi mō tō kōrero. Yeah, I'll just sort of picking up on what you're saying and with your whakaaro and the whakapapa of the biodiversity, and what I'm trying to work out in my mind is obviously when you've got these conservation groups and they don't have that the tupuna whakapapa taonga knowledge and mātauranga, but their intent is their goodwill and intent is really positive. And so what I'm wondering is, what do you see as regional council's role in enabling the intent of all of those conservation groups and volunteers, whilst also upholding the whakapapa and the tikanga of ahika mana whenua? What's our role? I mean, obviously we're working on a biodiversity strategy that I hope you'll be feeding into and that can encompass all of that. But is there anything more intentional that the council's role could be in this space without wanting to crush, with actually wanting to support all the voluntary people that are wanting to enhance and restore and protect our biodiversity?
Yeah, be careful what I say. Like, I don't want to I know what those efforts entail.
Yeah.
I've been part of these community trusts, but I kind of drew the line where I felt that my input on these community trusts were just to tick boxes, and they went through a process of MOU, which had a tangata whenua decision-making commitment with DOC, to a relationship agreement where we didn't really feature. We just acted as a trust board member. So that partnership wasn't there.
So it was like tokenistic as opposed to true Te Tiriti based partnership. Yeah. So it needs to be more intentional and more Te Tiriti founded.
And yes, and examples of when you give them this information, them or give us this information, there goes the swamp mairi. But the swamp mairi are below these kohatu tuahu, which is tapu, and they're collecting the seeds. They're trespassing. But it's a biodiversity thing that they've noticed. It's come up, and I've had that was my first interaction with Jake, is to have to trespass them off the land just for his own safety, because things have happened up there. Tapu things have happened up there, and we don't know what he's done, and if he's giving it to people, what the implications that'll comes back to us with our manaakitanga. That's what mana is actually about, what people say about you. Mana a ki, manaakitanga. So when you go on the marae, you want people to say good things about you, have a good kai and bit of a laugh, bit of whakangaho, and that's the whole concept of manaakitanga. So manaakitanga is like a practice of kaitiakitanga. They go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Kaitiakitanga is like putting up all the protocols. Yes, you can. No, you can't. It's because you got to follow and ask for permission. And in Te Ao Māori, there's a series of permission with your karakia, and then down to the actual landowner, because you're actually transgressing on their mana if you don't ask for this permission. And it's to protect yourself, because someone will ask you, who did you go up there? Or you might go and collect something and give someone something that you shouldn't have touched.
Thank you.
So that's how it's beneficial to have our people at the decision making at the board level.
Yeah, more
Anything
partnership.
with these community groups, because they're not actually when you're setting up these groups, they're not obliged like a government authority, I've heard, to actually have a treaty partnership relationship, and let alone we fit into a landowner relationship. But I know there's planes going over our lands and some of these
Thank you. I'll
community groups haven't
we'll
talked
just
to
let-
us.
Can we set the
Right,
final question to Chair McDonald and then make that quick if you can?
Very quickly, i te tuatahi, Des, ngā mihi ki a koe, engari, ngā mihi o tō taua marae o Popotiki i Mangatapu, hei patu ngā atua kei reira, engari he tino pauri. Des, thank you for the key points that you've given in your submission that are going to be very helpful in our deliberation going forward. I'm not going to ask any questions about what you prioritise there. To me, they're pretty straightforward, but thank you for that. The other thing I want to touch on, and that was very quickly what was raised by Councillor McMillan, which for me is kind of a red flag when we're going through these submissions from care groups, but not so much in being a showstopper, but obviously something that we as the regional council will have to consider when we're talking to care groups around their involvement with tangata whenua. So I'll take on board the concerns you've spoken to us about the difference in acknowledgement and difference in values. I totally get where you're coming from, and it sometimes I do take on board that as a concern when I do hear care groups of the involvement of iwi, but not actually knowing the level of that involvement. So thank you for raising the concern around the I don't think it's intended, but to some, and even to you, about the misappropriation of knowledge. Who is the knowledge holder, and how, who holds that knowledge, and how that knowledge transpires into the mahi that they're doing. So I think that's something that we have to take on board too when we're dealing with the respective care groups, and we're asking those questions around the level of involvement and what that actually looks like. So kia ora, ngā mihi.
Thank you very much, Des. Appreciate
Hi.
your time.
I was
Thank you.
saying if we have some relative access and like equity around the decision making, then maybe we can work alongside more. Oh, that's why I say I've got to be careful because I do in some capacity work with care groups and landowners, Pākehā and Māori, and but I just need to on this point just stress those cultural constraints.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
Thank you, Des. For our next presentation, we were due to have Julie Shepherd, but we have a super sub coming in for Julie. So Heta Gardner, if you could make your way in, that would be fantastic. So councillors, you may require your headsets. This presentation will be in te reo. Kia ora. Floor is yours. Heta.
Kia ora tātou. Tuatahi ake, kei reira te ahua atu o ngā whakaaro ki a rātou. Ko mene atu ki te pō ki te karapunipunitango o ngā wairua, ngā mate huhua o te wāhaere atura, haere atura. Kia rātou hoki, ko Pākinotia, i te karawhiu o tangaroa atu i te whanganui a tara, kei reira ngā whakaaro ki a rātou. Kia tātou hoki, ko Pākinotia ki ngā whiu o ngā huarere, kei reira te aroha ki a tātou katoa. Kia koutou, kua hui mai nei e ngā kai kaunihera tēnā koutou. Te katoa ko tātou mai me te hunga, ko tāi mai ki te tuku whakaaro, koe anei te mihi kia tātou katoa. Kia ora tātou. I'm Heta Gardner, I'm the Kaihotu for Te Pirirako Tribal Authority. Ka Pirirako hapu, Pirirako is the hapu from Tauranga Moana, and we're anchored by our four marae, tū te reinga, tautu te rangi, paparoa, and tawhitinui. And to give an idea of scale, as recently as 2012, we had over 6,000 registered members, and we use that, we treat that as a conservative baseline for us. Now, our written submission to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council Annual Plan AP2026-2027, and the long-term plan amendment has been tabled, so that should be read as our full position. The annual plan and long-term plan amendment planning needs to work for the whole region. And that means your funding and priority setting must actively include tangata whenua and community-led projects, not only projects that are already on Council's current programs or existing priority lists. Now, there are three things that we would like to leave you with today. Firstly, the consultation topics need to result in real change on the ground. If the Council is increasing investment in biosecurity and fresh water, it must be set up so new places and new partners can be funded, especially where communities have been carrying environmental impacts for decades. Second, if you establish the Regional Benefit Fund, it has to be accessible and it has to fund physical outcomes, not just administrative overheads. The criteria should value community delivery, cultural benefit, and employment at a time when jobs and training are needed for youth. It should also be user-friendly enough that tangata whenua and local groups can actually use it. And thirdly, the Council needs to broaden where it looks for priority work. A practical example is Te Hakau, a hugely modified waterway where its mana has been minimised to function as a series of drains. It has significant cumulative impacts from infrastructure and development, and it is exactly the kind of place that should be eligible and prioritised, even if it's not currently prominent in the Council's existing frameworks. This is what it looks like to expand beyond the usual list of supported sites. So our message is, don't limit this plan to what is already underway. Build in the ability to back tangata whenua and community extensive environmental projects, identify and fund new priority locations, and measure success by what changes in the waterways and biosecurity. Open to questions.
Sure, thank you. Councillors, questions? We have no questions? Oh, Councillor Corkindale.
Not so much a question, but just thank you so much for the depth of thought that has gone into the submission and for bringing this to us and encouraging us to broaden our thinking. Particularly, I've really taken on taken on the message about really genuine long-term relationships and also community-driven priorities. And so thank you for bringing that to this table. Kia ora.
Councillor Defoe.
Tēnā koe, te rangatira, tēnā koe hoa e whakamanahi i tēnei o tō tātanei kaupapa i te ata nei. Miharo katoa, me tō tūranga hau, me ki rima marama o whā marama kua pahuri ake nei nai, nā reira ka te kakamihi atu ki a koe. Again, as said by Councillor McCorkindale, thank you for your submission and thank you for being a part of the kaupapa today. I've only got one pātai, and that goes in regards to some of the kōrero that's written in your submission around here. Do you think there's a process that's missing within the consent component or the biodiversity component that could actually support some of these recommendations in your tono today?
I guess I wouldn't frame it necessarily as missing, but there is always, in terms of engagement with Te Māori, in terms of engagement with hapu and the value that we can add in these spaces, there perhaps is not as much, not just consultation, but genuine communication within these spaces. Māori, and it's not just Te Pirirako, but Māori have a lot to add in these spaces and a lot to contribute. And so Māori broadly as well are always very open to having these relationships and having these discussions and establishing those partnerships. So I would say broadly, just more communication and connection would certainly help.
Koe, for you, the Chair, just to make that noted into our communications plan moving forward as well, please. E te rangatira, tēnā koe.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate your comms. We're very on point. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Hold up.
Our next submitter, I think, is in the room. Is that Chris down the back? Yes, Chris from Waikato. You do it. For other submitters in the room, we are just running around about 20 minutes behind schedule. So if you can keep the nerves at bay for another 20 minutes, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Ko Chris Batishall, tōku ingoa. I'm the Tohiwera Takatai, or the Coastal Chair, University of Waikato. It's the Bay of Plenty Regional Council Chair, and I speak on behalf of my colleague, Dennis Oskandaki, who's Tohiwera Wai Māori. And we will be brief. All we wish to do is emphasise the need to invest in biodiversity resilience and maintain a structure that facilitates community-oriented outcomes with investment in strategic infrastructure. As you will note from the submission that we've filed already, we support option 3 in restructuring the investment portfolio, including separation of port and non-port assets from special purpose assets, as this provides a more stable and transparent framework for delivering intergenerational outcomes. Also support the establishment of a regional benefit fund to enable investment in infrastructure, science and capability required to achieve the Council's environmental and resilience objectives at appropriate scales. So that latter part is quite important. In this, we firmly believe that the Regional Council has led Aotearoa in this regard for many, many years, and we wish to endorse and thank the Regional Council for its vision. What I'd like to do today is just re-emphasise very briefly what's at stake from a marine and freshwater perspective. For the marine, coastal natural capital is worth 7.4 billion New Zealand dollars, directly related to maritime sectors, 3% of the GDP currently. The most recent review of its type in 2017 identified direct marine economic activity revenue at 3.8 billion per year. Where there is information available, and this is for the Hauriki Gulf from a report NZIER in 2024, it was valued at 5.14 billion per year in terms of revenue generation. The Bay of Plenty, with its major port infrastructure as well as its fisheries and economic base, is probably worth at least that. Internationally, the bioeconomy is worth over $200 billion US per year, and we as a country, as a nation, have not even scratched the surface of that. And to support some of the bioeconomy, or the marine bioeconomy, and indeed the marine biodiversity credit system that we're currently working on with international colleagues, on the flip side of this page is just a very, very brief example that has relevance to this country of what genetic marine resources are worth in terms of access and certainly benefit sharing, a dividend of, in this case, it's modelled on marine bioactives that are being used as drugs. Halibin, which is in that table, so it's very small, is the New Zealand added component of that. But it just gives you some perspective of the value of marine natural resources that we're currently working on. And these rely implicitly on preservation of what's remaining of our biodiversity. They are going to be worth quite a significant amount in the future as these biodiversity credits come on board internationally, and also as the international community starts to look at proper benefit share from genetic marine resources back to the country and region of origin. So that's just for further information. In lakes and freshwater natural capital terms, as you all well know, freshwater systems underpin a substantial proportion of New Zealand's economy. In the Tarawa Lakes, they generate benefits themselves in the order of 100 million in terms of water supply, nutrient processing, carbon cycling, biodiversity support, and of course, cultural and recreational values. As you well know, are painfully aware, restoration of degraded freshwater systems represents a major and ongoing financial commitment, 1 to 2 billion or more nationally across the country, in particular of these times of massive flooding, as we're now experiencing rather sadly. So investment in freshwater management delivers measurable co-benefits, including improved water quality, enhanced biodiversity, reduced flood risk, and increased resilience to climate change. So these issues are what's at stake at the moment. So in summary, both Dennis and I would like to just state that given the value of our freshwater and coastal ecosystems, we strongly support increased and sustained investments in Indigenous biodiversity and climate resilience, recognising that these are the foundations of the region's long-term well-being and economic future. These outcomes are best delivered through enduring partnerships with councils, iwi and hapu, research institutions, and importantly, and supported by robust scientific capability and regional coordination. So thank you for allowing me to re-emphasise these points in our delivery. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate the relationship. Councillor Shirley, Councillor Grayling.
Thank you, Chris, for the submission. I'm referring to the second paragraph in your submission tabled just now, where you say you support option 3 for the restructuring of the investment portfolio, including the separation of port and non-port assets from special purpose assets, as this provides more stable and transparent framework for delivering intergenerational outcomes. Just to sort of set the scene for that, the concept of the investment portfolio is to generate wealth, and then the separation of that is the distribution of the dividend of that rather than eroding the nest egg. I just don't see how the deaggregation of the wealth generator actually delivers more favourable and transparent intergenerational outcomes. I just don't see that connection.
Okay, I'm probably taking that from some experience that I've had in terms of investment in looking at marine futures in the Western Australian scenario, where a fund was set up from investments from oil and gas companies, but it was set up in a way that disconnected those agencies which were creating profit through business from the outcomes. So it wasn't perceived that they were owning or directing any of the benefits on a more national or regional scale to the public. Otherwise, there was a conflict of interest that was apparent in those systems. So I've probably not worded that properly enough to be able to, I think, emphasise the disconnect between where funding is earned and then how it's delivered.
Yeah, that was the point I was trying to make.
Yep.
I just can't make that connection.
Yeah, no, and I take advice on how better to do that, to be honest.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Grayling.
I'll just keep this really quick, Chris. Thanks for the submission. I really appreciate the time you've put into it. Through our consultation, we're consulting on the quantum of funding for biodiversity, and obviously that covers everything terrestrial, freshwater and marine. And what are your thoughts on the quantum of funding that is proposed at $20 million?
I think that's probably under budgeted. I'd be suggesting around 50 million, given the immediacy of the issues that we're facing.
Thank you, Chris. And again, thank you for your detailed submission. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for the chance.
Thank you. Our next submitter is Helen Carter. And Helen is supported by Bill Holland and Richard Cashmore. Thank you, Helen. Just push the green button when you wish to speak so people online can hear. And you've got around about 5 minutes to speak and 5 minutes for councillors' questions. Thank you.
Right. Kia ora tātou. Thank you for the opportunity to come this morning and speak to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council annual plan and long-term plan amendment. I'm representing Cancer Society for Wakatu in the Bay of Plenty and the communities that we serve. In a nutshell, we strongly support the proposed regional benefit fund, particularly its intent around large-scale infrastructure to deliver long-term clear regional benefits through trusted partners. Our submission showcases how this fund could immediately be put to use to solve social, economic wellbeing issues for the whole Bay of Plenty through cancer accommodation near Tauranga Hospital. But first and foremost, I would like to introduce, I'm flanked here this morning with Richard Cashmore and Bill Holland. Many of you may know them. They're passionate local advocates for the Bay of Plenty, recognised on the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to the community. Bill was chair of TECT for many years as well. So they are speaking as well to the Cancer Society submission with all their knowledge and passion for the community. Richard.
I think Bill.
Bill.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for this opportunity. And yes, I was the chairman of TECT for 10 years. And during that time, there was a complete restructuring. And so I want to share that experience with you because it is important. You're about to go through a restructuring. And where we've finished up with after a long process is that we basically needed to benefit the Trustpower customers and also the wider community. So what we've done, we've got two separate trusts. One is for the Trustpower customers, and they get $500 a year each, which is a little bit the same as your rates concessions. The other is for the wider community, where everybody benefits, and this is from Tauranga and Western Bay of Plenty. That second trust is a charitable trust, which doesn't have to pay any tax, which is good, and it has assets, net assets of about $1 billion, and it makes annual distributions to the community of $40 million. That was transformational. It had previously been $8 million. So that's huge. Quite apart from that, it also makes impact investments. So it's not always just grants. There are impacts investments, which is what you folk are talking about as well as your grants. And bear that in mind. Because, for instance, the Waikato University wanted to be able to buy some of the land around it, but didn't have the money. So we basically lent it in sort of like a rental interest type situation, very beneficial to the community, to the university. So you can do the same sort of thing. There will be investments you can make, which you don't necessarily expect the full return, but can benefit the community. So those essentially are what we have done. And it's, I didn't try to go through all the detail of your stuff. I haven't got time anyway, but that's essentially where we're at. It's a very simple process now. Now, I realize that our situation is very different to yours, but it is valid in that in a way we're trying to achieve the same objective. We were trying to achieve the objective for Tauranga or Western Bay. You're trying to achieve it for the whole of the regional area, and that's great. So you should. So Richard, you might like to add to that.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning. I note from your consultation document that the major theme is using investment income more actively to benefit the region. Helen and I sat here some 18 months ago when we were originally starting this project and made a presentation to the previous council. And one of the first questions Helen asked of the members sitting at the table was, how many of you have friends, relatives, family that have been affected by cancer? Now, basically everybody in the room put their hand up. There is no greater source of or health issue in the Bay of Plenty, and that's right through the whole region, than cancer. And that's something that we're working towards sort of supporting. So that ties in totally with what you're wishing to achieve. The question I ask as a layman, and I congratulate you on the fact that you're looking at a $3 billion investment fund. Just how big does the fund have to be against how much you give back to the community that desperately needs it? And I think that's a question that each of us would ask as every person who's a ratepayer or contributor in the whole Bay of Plenty region would be asking of you as councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to wrap up, when we talk about cancer, as Richard mentioned, it is the leading cause of death nationwide and diagnoses are increasing. But the Bay of Plenty is special for the wrong reasons because you carry a disproportionate burden. You have high population growth, you have an ageing population, you have a rural isolation, you have social deprivation, and you have a large Māori population who experience later diagnosis and poor survival rates. Distance to treatment, travel time to treatment creates inequities, it creates burdens. And in a world of cancer where some of the medication are too complicated to even pronounce, there are simple solutions to solve problems that look too gnarly to solve. And a fund like this can be part of that. Evidence shows that if you can solve access to treatment, you can create economic benefit, social benefit, wellbeing benefit. We have a proven model at Cancer Society of delivering $4.60 to every $1 of investment in terms of social benefits. To put it in perspective, the simple solution looks as practical as accommodation, a 40-bedroom facility near the hospital that provides wraparound support and services, meals, whānau connection, counselling, and in the first year alone, something like this facility would support hundreds of Bay of Plenty residents who are going through a journey. So with that in mind, we really do invite you to consider what could be, what might be, what is possible to achieve immediately by unlocking a fund like you are proposing for not just benefit today, but intergenerational benefit for the long term. It is the only region in the country with full cancer services and no accommodation that's free, supportive, caring, loving, that delivers such substantive outcomes that have a ripple effect for the person, their whānau and their community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. And I would just note in the submission during the consultation period, Helen approached me and said, did she think it'd be worthwhile the organisation submitting? And under the context of we were looking at a regional fund, I encouraged the organisation to put forward a submission. So she's noted that in the submission, and I did that under the points of we were looking for a wide variety of projects to consider and through our deliberations. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Maltby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cancers are very, as you say, it affects everyone. Skin cancer is very high here. I think everyone knows people have died from cancer. But my question is really just clarification. Some years ago, my young niece was in hospital and the family stayed at the Ronald McDonald. So is this for patients and family or just patients?
Most of the time, given cancer affects generally an older population, we look at patients and their support people more than children, more so because Starship is
Well,
the way.
wouldn't be the same as Ronald McDonald.
No,
I'm just talking about the
but
same.
I'll give you an example. In Hamilton, we have a 58-bedroom facility that serves all of Waikato and some of the specialist patients here. If they have a family need, that is an exception. We accommodate, we have family units for those specific reasons. It's not the main purpose of why people come to stay for us, but we endeavour to do whatever we can to support people.
So are they self-catering or do you provide meals?
No, we're the only facility in New Zealand that provides 3 nutritious meals a day. You've got to stay with us for 6 weeks to eat the same thing twice. And we would envisage the same here because I believe the only thing you need to worry about when you stay with Cancer Society is fighting cancer. You don't worry about anything else.
Very good.
Councillor Shirley, then Councillor Defoe.
Thank you for your submission. My question, I guess, is directed at you in terms of your tech experience, but also Helen with your comment about unlocking the fund. And this is a matter we're wrestling with, and I'd welcome your help. That the whole concept is to have an intergenerational endowment fund, and we've got New Zealand Super and KiwiSaver, and one concept is that you keep the fund aggregated, economies of scale, and you distribute the dividend, the earnings of that. You don't erode the nest egg. And a lot of people seem to think that, by unlocking the fund as you just carve up and sub out all the various aspects of the nest egg. But you can have all sorts of trusts on the distribution side, but one of the consultation proposals was the separation of the port generating shares and other investments, whereas some would think that by keeping it together as a single entity with the economies of scale makes a lot more sense. So I'm just trying to get that distinction, and from particularly with the tech experience, in terms of the wealth generator, the benefits of keeping it as a single entity generating the wealth, and then you can have all manner of myriads of sub-trusts on the distribution side, but don't confuse the two.
Absolutely. And my experience came from when I went to the States to find out how community foundations work there. They worked on an average of 9% a year of return. And you could say that sounds high, but I was there in 2002, just after the dot-com collapse. And if you'd run it back through the previous 80 years, the average return was 9%. And so when we set up Acorn, what we've done, and this still carries on, they work on the basis of 9% a year, and sometimes it's 12%, sometimes it's 7%, it changes. But they give out 4 to 5%, and the balance stays in the fund. So you're growing the fund all the time. And that answers your question, I think. And just two other things I'm going to pick up on. One is that I'm a cancer survivor. I had stage 3B bowel cancer. That's serious. That was 8 years ago. If you got stage 4, that was you. I wouldn't be sitting here now. So I know all about cancer. I know about what impact it has on you. And I was fortunate. I had a wife here who could look after me. If you were over there, boy, it's tough. And so I speak from personal experience. The other thing I'd say is that as a lawyer, the most popular charity, not many people leave money to charity in their wills, but the most popular one is Waipuna Hospice. And I would rank this right up there. Once it's established, it will get that support because it's something which, as we've said, we all impact either directly or indirectly from cancer.
Councillor Tafau.
Can I just add briefly to that? Sorry. I don't think anybody would be expecting you to reduce the fund. I think we owe it to future generations to inflation-proof and protect the fund, but it's the distribution of the benefits from the fund that can be greatly enlarged without damaging the fund.
Slightly clumsy words on my behalf. I run a charity that is fully donor-driven, so sustainability keeps me awake at night. You have to be sustainable.
So that goes to the heart of disaggregation. It would not be wise, in your view, then, to disaggregate an income-earning fund.
We need support from organisations like the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, given the community impact for now and,
But from the distribution side of the earnings, not from disaggregation of the primary assets.
Yeah, you'll be over and out too.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's the new fund that I meant by unlocking. Yeah, sorry.
Tēnā koe, Helen, of tērā, tēnā kōrua, Bill, Richard. First of all, just thank you for being here today in your submission. I know many people that have used the Lions Lodge in their ways of treatment, and for the patient and one of their whānau to be there at the lodge, being supportive through radiation is a huge thing, and I've seen it for my own eyes. And cancer isn't a good thing, and I know that many people around this table have had somebody impacted by cancer. I think, Richard, you already actually answered my question around the sustainability of what you see this fund being look like. My other question was basically, roughly, how much do you think this benefit fund should realistically be for the whole Bay of Plenty to be accountable and considering that you already know that the asset base around over $3 billion, but yet that's the assets, not just the money, and then the distribution of that is separately done in regards to prioritising things that are out there. But after listening to some of the conversations and reading your submission today, I think it's quite wise if we hear what is needed in our community. And Deputy Chair Glenn Google is correct. We wanted to get a different perspective, a whole perspective of different organisations that are servicing our community.
I think probably Bill tried to answer that from a layman's perspective, but basically if I was sitting in your chair, I'd be looking at a fund manager to give us a forecast of what the fund was anticipating earning. I think everybody around the table agrees that we protect the fund and we build an inflation factor so that protects it for future years. And if a fund manager says that it can produce 9%, deduct the inflation amount from that and the balance goes to the community.
Tēnā koe e hoa. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou.
Helen, Bill, Richard, thank you very much for your submission. We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is Heidi. Oh, Heidi's here, yes. It's not Wednesday, but we welcome the challenge. Floor is yours, Heidi. Just hit the button to speak. Thank you.
I think it's green already. Is that good? Yeah. Hi. Kia ora, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. We've responded to the questions specifically in our submission as well. Today, I just wanted to introduce ourselves and talk about how important transport is as part of Sorry. The Wednesday Challenge has been now going for 5 years. Last year, we recorded close to 1 million journeys in our apps. That's 1 million journeys that are hand put in of people taking multimodal journeys. We now work with councils all over the country and we work with their travel teams. So we've been really watching the change that has come with the last government policy statement change and what that's meant for transport and mode shift around New Zealand. And part of the message I want to give today is that between political cycles, it's really important to be able to hold the line on the outcomes that you want to achieve around climate emissions and transport resilience, because otherwise you lose so much of that intel and so much of that work that is sitting that we've seen get decimated in the councils that we've been working with across the country. So can we just change? Oh, have I got? Look at that! I've got one. Okay. Oh, just wanted to just say, what we work with is behaviour change. So it's one part of the change that needs to happen, but it's a really important piece, and it's really reliant on having a great infrastructure and a real intent to deliver better options for people to be able to make those choices safely. We work with a lot of children, obviously, and just showing you that just shifting the dial is from giving the right message to children and to working with their parents, because there's so many benefits to when your kids are biking or walking or becoming more independent than it is from dropping them off at school every day, from emissions through to health and well-being. So we do achieve really good results, but these results are based on what we can do with the schools and the kids that could and would, given their current challenges around the transport system. So today, this is an annual plan timeframe, which is getting ready, obviously, for the long-term plan. And I wanted to just talk through a few things. The first, as an overview, looking at having a fund for ensuring that there's good investment into things that can create change in the Bay of Plenty is a great outcome, and I'd like you guys to consider transport as a big part of that. Over half of the emissions in our region come from transport. We're dealing with massive issues around resilience right now, resilience and different options for people to transport themselves around the region and between regions, becoming absolutely critical in terms of watching what's happening with the oil crisis. Electrification, incredibly important. How can regional council look at what these investments are being used for to create resilience and to meet some of the some of the outcomes that regional council are wanting to achieve around climate resilience and around climate carbon emissions. And that's not only with the fund, the fund that comes out of the investments that you have, but also those investments themselves. So currently, if you've got the port and you've got Quayside Holdings, what are the investment portfolio that are actually going to also double down on the results that you want to achieve as well? So rather than there being a separation between a profit-driven model, which obviously you want to have, but what are the businesses and what are the investments that are going to double down and achieve results? And it would be great to see what that might look like in terms of transport, in terms of and densification around transport hubs as well. So the first one here, regional rail, in terms of building towards the long-term plan, we'd like to see a business case for the Golden Triangle. We'd like to see, Waikato is asking for support with the business case, and we'd really like to get that piece of work done so they'd be ready for making some really good decisions in the LTP. We've got a train coming in a couple of weeks. It's sold out in 2 days, and there is so much demand for regional rail. And in terms of resilience around what happens if, for example, we lose our airport, if we can't get jet fuel, if Air New Zealand decides to rationalise and not give us as many flights, we need to have options regionally for as we grow, and regional rail is the number one priority in terms of that resilience for transport. The second thing, electric ferries. This obviously was also a casualty of the change in direction in the government policy statement on transport, but we'd like to see that be looked at again. This is another way for you to electrify your transport system, to use a different mode of travel across our waters rather than across our roads when we have climate emergencies and our roads might be out. We can still travel by ferry, etc., to Omakoroa and between the city and the Mount. Just looking at that, going back to the whole resilience of choices and electrification of our transport system, so we're not reliant on scarce fuel sources. On-demand buses, Timaru has just been. We would promote that you look at the pilot that you're already getting underway, look at what Timaru has done and how it's grown, and look at how that might work for some of your smaller centres like Rotorua and Whakatane. Also electrification and what the sources of where you could provide those electrical sources from. Is that a good investment area for creating solar farms, etc., to charge those buses? Climate resilience and mitigation fund. Now, that's another thing we wanted to bring to you. When we are, our funding for our program has come predominantly from climate grants from around the country. And that has been a lifeline for all of the innovative solutions around climate that we are seeing around the country during a time when there's a lack of investment in that space. Tauranga City Council has a climate fund, and it's oversubscribed. I implore you to do a piece of work, a paper that can come back to you from your staff to look at what's happening with the climate grants around the country, who's doing what. Northland has a climate grant. Canterbury has a climate grant. There's Hamilton, a lot of the cities do as well. And the partnerships that you get through those are gold, because it's where funding can start to incubate new ideas and to trial new innovations and to really build something that then can become something that adds value to your region. So I just recommend that that climate grant is something. Currently, you've got the Environment Enhancement Fund, which is really, really narrow in its focus. It's very hard to access that for anything other than doing planting projects. And I think was that the bell for being out of time? But I wanted to, the other thing that I've come in to talk about is that we are promoting a national public transport month, and we're seeking funding for this. We want to have a month where public transport is a national campaign where it is generating some real momentum around mode shift. So I've just got a couple of slides to leave you with there, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. Whoops, there is, so just a campaign that not only happens in the Bay of Plenty, but doubles down on outcomes around the country. We want to get this going in October this year, develop all those relations, make it an incredibly collaborative approach. We want to work with businesses. We want to work with all of the organisations throughout the region and with all the city councils and regional councils throughout the country, and really build some momentum. So we're talking to all of the regional councils throughout New Zealand to contribute to this campaign. So basically it's a contribution to a $350,000 contribution to get it underway, and the Bay of Plenty contribution would be $30,000 towards that. I'll leave this with you.
Questions, Councillor?
Got it. Sorry for going over time.
And then Councillor Corkindale, and then Councillor McMillan, and then Councillor Scrimmager.
Thank you for your submission, and thank you for coming to speak to it today. I'm curious to see how far east any train system would go. Thinking particularly of Whakatane, where we've actually got a rail network that's still in use, and we have problems moving people in and out of the district and a very unreliable airport. So are there any plans to include our area in this?
In terms of, in the first instance with rail, we want to go for the most economically viable route first. So that would be we've now got the Te Huia Hamilton Auckland connection. Linking it up to the Tauranga connection is the most economically viable option first. That makes absolute sense, with the highest growing. We want to, you also, when you have regional rail, you need to have a good intensity of population in one area. And then obviously once it's here, then the next step would be to look at what it looks like regionally. So yes, absolutely. But the most economically viable way to start that is to get those first connections going first.
Thank you, Heidi, so much for your submission and for bringing this presentation to us today as well. I'm really curious to see what your thinking is around, for us decision makers at the table, public transport is already over $50 million, and just to give some perspective, biodiversity gets around 22 million. So it's already a really big ticket item for us. If we're going to invest more in public transport, what's your sense of what it's not so much how do we fund it, but what might we let go if or do you see us rating the community more, extracting more from investments? Do you see some of our functions as being less important than public transport and we should do a trade-off? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that there should be more government co-investment back into those multimodal solutions. So that would be an advocacy piece. But and in terms, and I think it's we need to do business cases on what is the value of each option. So I'd like to see more looking at what the options are and so that you can make choices, informed decisions between options rather than just kind of keeping on growing one option and then it being between roads and multimodal. What are we investing in roads and what are we getting in return and what are the business cases and where are we best to put our money? And also equity. We need to really look at equity in transport because it's something that's not put into the business cases. Where are our communities and who's missing out on transport when you can't have a car and your only option is public transport? So equity is a really, really important piece in the public transport piece, and it's not showing up enough in our business cases to give us a better indication of where the value sits for our communities.
Thank you very much.
McMillan and Councillor Scrimgeour.
Oh, thanks, Heidi. So building on that in terms of, the process more than anyone, the Regional Land Transport Plan, and obviously you're looking at all of the sub-regions and all of their wish lists and needs. How do you elevate that long-term thinking for modal shift in terms of equitable and sustainable transport system? Do you think you need to add in a principle of a future generations lens or an equity lens or a longer term thinking lens or a modal shift lens into the RLTP and then rank it against that? Like how would you shift it from all of the roading kind of wish lists that come from all of the sub-regional mayors and councillors to focusing on an intergenerational project like interregional rail?
I think the longer term, the better, but I think you also need to really go back to your baseline every time and look what's changed. And the world has changed. And I think we need to be really cognizant that this fuel crisis is a sign of the instability that comes from our reliance on fossil fuels. So what does that mean? What does that mean for our airports? What does it mean for our car system, our reliance on freight moving by road, all of those things. So I think it's, in my view, yes, long term, but always reassessing the baseline. And I think it's really important right now to go, what's changed in our baseline and what do we do?
Yeah, so you're looking at a geopolitical environment lens over that and the changing operating environment of the world and Aotearoa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every time you set the RLTP.
As well, because we haven't done that, and we it's now loud and clear. But it has not only shown up as geopolitical, but it's just shown up the vulnerability in the whole system of storage, of reliance and all of those things. And now it's showing up in equity as well, and what the knock-on effects are to the community when a transport system is reliant on road freight and it's our food systems, it's everything. So,
Thank you.
Councillor Scrimgeour.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. I might be ahead of the game with this question, given that you've asked for a business case study on passenger rail, but we did have another submitter yesterday talking about Te Huia, and so I looked up the passenger numbers, and I see that it's running on average at around about 50% capacity this year. So just wondering, do you have suggestions of how we can fill those empty seats?
Yeah, it's been a very, one of the main reasons for that has been all the disruption that's been caused by the building of the new rail system. They have had to do a lot of grade separation of rail at various points. So it's closed down and slowed down the train often and made it unable to run at certain times. So that's why Te Huia has just asked and received an extension on their pilot. This is a pilot right now on that, because they've been piloting. They started through COVID, then they piloted through all of these rail disruptions, and it has yet to be its best self. It's once this new loop opens, it will be able to operate so much faster, because it creates a loop and be able to get out a lot faster. So it's not at capacity because it's not been able to run at its proper service yet, in my view.
I'm hearing you rightly, you saying the attractiveness of scheduling will make a big difference.
Scheduling and
Running to
reliance.
time.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Sorry, I could have said that in a shorter time frame, couldn't I?
Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate the work you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
If I can invite the Makatū Rurunga up. Again, thank you for your patience. And to the other submitters in the room, we are just running 20 minutes behind time, so I appreciate your patience. Thank you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Tēnā koe te mana, o tira tēnā koutou katoa te kaunihira. Makatū is a place of great historical significance as both the landing place of Te Arawa Waka and a centre of development for the region in the early days of colonisation. And as Ahika, Ngāti Whakaue is committed to halting further environmental degradation and ensuring that the important early steps already taken to restore our land and water are supported and accelerated. Of particular concern is the impact of climate change and the urgent need to build community resilience for the changes anticipated over the next 50 to 100 years. Protecting and enhancing Indigenous biodiversity is an integral part of this resilience. We represent Te Runanga o Ngāti Whakaue Mai Maketu, the mandated iwi authority representing the interests of Ngāti Whakaue in and around Maketu. Established in 2002, the Runanga exists to protect and enhance the mana, rights and responsibilities of our hapu, particularly in relation to whenua, wai and moana. Our work spans environmental leadership, treaty claims advocacy, education, community development and capacity building initiatives. We maintain strong relationships with central and local government, community organisations and research institutions, and we're guided at all times by tikanga, kōrero tuku iho and the values of Ngāti Whakaue ki tai. We wish to speak to consultation topic 3, investing in Indigenous biodiversity. We strongly support increased investment in the protection and restoration of Indigenous biodiversity across the Bay of Plenty, with a particular emphasis on genuine long-term partnerships with iwi and local communities. The Bay of Plenty is home to unique ecosystems and taonga species found nowhere else in the world. However, these ecosystems continue to face significant pressures from habitat loss, invasive species, climate change, and land use intensification. Without increase in sustained investment, the region risks further irreversible biodiversity decline. Protecting Indigenous biodiversity is not only an environmental responsibility, but also essential to the region's cultural identity, economic resilience, and long-term well-being. Iwi and hapu are hungatiaki, or guardians of the natural environment, and hold deep mātauranga that is critical to effective biodiversity management. In Maketu, we have an over 800-year relationship with our immediate environment. The Council should prioritise co-management approaches that enable iwi to lead and actively shape biodiversity initiatives. Existing projects such as Te Wahapu o Waihi and the Maketu Climate Adaptation Plan demonstrate what effective partnership can achieve. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council has played an integral role in both. This level of support must not only be maintained, but expanded. These partnerships deliver meaningful outcomes for both the environment and the community. At an operational level, I'm pleased to advise that your officials in the land management and climate change teams are effective and understand the vital role that community groups, landowners, volunteers, and of course iwi play in protecting biodiversity and the environment. A prime example is Te Hiri wetland at Cutwater Road in Pukehina. This is a project driven by Te Wahapu o Waihi Iwi Collective in conjunction with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and we, the Makatu Runanga, are an active member in that collective. To achieve meaningful impact, biodiversity funding must be increased and sustained over time. Short-term or fragmented funding limits the ability to plan and deliver effective restoration. Multi-year investment now will reduce future costs and help safeguard essential ecosystem services such as clean water, soil stability, and climate resilience. And finally, climate change must remain a central consideration for the Council as it directly affects the region's environmental, economic, and social well-being. Maketu is projected to require the development of at least 120 new homes, and that's a big number for Maketu. 120 new homes over the coming decades based on current modelling. This represents a minimum estimate of future housing demand driven by the impacts of climate change. It is important that this projected growth is proactively incorporated into council planning and decision making. I will close with this whakatauki. In Te Ao Māori, whakatauki is seen as the wisdom of the past, guiding the decisions of today for the benefit of tomorrow. This is the wisdom we wish to offer you as you go through your deliberations. Ka ora te tai ao, ka ora te tangata. When the environment is well, the people are well and will prosper. O tira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Well, thank you. Councillors, any questions? Donald.
Tēnā koe Roana, nice to see you here, and thank you for your submission. I've just got one question to ask, and really, do you have a recommendation about the quantum figure? We have allocated 20 million for that, and given what you've just given, what is yours?
It needs to be double that, notwithstanding the financial constraints that you operate in. We've also submitted on the concept of the fund, which I won't cover verbally now, but it's in the paper. We absolutely believe that a fund should be established, and it's up to yourselves to develop that balance between what you give out now and what's held in that endowment. Being of Ngāti Whakaue descent, we have the Ngāti Whakaue Education Endowment Fund, which was started 100 years ago. That is up to about 100 million now as the core fund, and that has sustained a lot of education. It's supported a lot of our whānau through education. So I understand the value of an endowment, but 20 million, we all know that that is not enough, and I think it's a good number to start, but I'd say double it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona, for presenting. We
welcome.
appreciate it. Thank you. Jan, sorry, yeah. Yeah. Kia ora, Jan.
Good,
Thanks for joining
good
us.
afternoon, everybody. Mr. Chair, my name is Jan Banish. I'm the principal at Jace Investments. I just would like to speak to you in respects of the involvement for the Jason Investment opposes the proposed changes that would increase Bellplaine Regional Council involvement in governance and decision-making of Quayside Holdings. Request the council retain the current governance structure and maintain an arm's length approach that support commercial decision-making and a long-term regional benefit. And I've been listening for a little while in the room, and one of the things I'd like to, I've seen a lot of instances in the past where we actually have a look at slicing up the pie at the expense of growing the pie. And I think both can be, if we separate, just challenging, separate the outlook of how do we grow the pie on one side of the ledger and then figuring out sensible distribution of the pie. And those are two different functions. If we start looking how to slice the pie, we potentially undermine the future growth of an ability to then manage the pie. So there's been plenty of instances in that space. Just to give you a little bit of background, Jason Investment has purchased lot 12 and 13 in Stage 1 Rangiora Business Park in late 2025. We plan to develop a leading kiwifruit processing facility and post-harvest facility for the future expansion of our facilities in Te Ariko as Mount Packing Cool. In selecting the site, we carefully considered a number of factors. One of them was the ownership and management of the subdivision, specifically the Rangiora Business Park. Quayside Holdings. It was important to us that the subdivision was managed by an organization with strong reputation, proven track record, and demonstrated delivery of regional benefit. That was by separating the Quayside Holdings from the short-term political discussion with a focused management team to grow the size of the pie. I think it's very important in today's world because specifically to the Rangiora Business Park, if you do have a decision-making that's based on political, the activation of, say, like investments, where if the management is not focused on delivery, can undermine the future investment value of those that have invested in there. So strongly, I'd like the council to consider separating the growing of the pie away from slicing of the pie and actually trying to deliver both. And I do believe there's a number of projects that can benefit from how we allocate those funds and distribute the funds based on. But let's make sure that we've got a strong investment arm focusing on delivering the long-term benefits, not just short-term. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Maltby? Councillor Shirley? Ms. Maltby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. We have heard that the consultation has caused a bit of angst amongst the Rangiora business community. Is that correct?
It is certainly to me, for us personally as a company, we've done a lot of due diligence based on the activation of the park and the future direction. This decision to start rolling into a political sphere could potentially undermine the investment in future sales of the subdivision.
I think that might actually put people off from moving it.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Shirley.
For this motion, that was very clear. I'm just seeking clarification, though, in terms of your concern with the consultation document for this planning process. Your point, as I took it, was to maintain and grow the pie and only slice up the earnings, the dividends. And that's where the political decision-making comes in on how you distribute the earnings of an ever-increasing pie, hopefully. What specifically in the consultation documents in this process causes you concern and makes you think that we're slicing up the nest egg, as it were?
Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit of a, if I can say, a little bit ambiguous in the documents and the information that I've seen. So non-clarity for starters is one of my concerns that I don't exactly understand. I'm only surmising as to the direction that this is heading. So probably non-clarity and late, and finding out at a very late stage that there is decision-making about future direction of Quayside and its investment within the portfolio. So, if, for example, the Rangiora Business Park activation is part of that, yeah. So, sorry, not sure whether that answered the question.
Thanks for that. Your very fact that it confuses you concerns me because it's not clear.
Yeah. And I did ask a number of people, a number of questions to say, what does this actually mean? What are we trying to do? Because, and then, for example, I had a meeting 12 months ago when I heard that the proposed sale of the 50% stake in the port. And to me, as a ratepayer, it alarms me that we're considering sale of what I would consider from investment perspective, crown jewels, and reallocating the funds from that. So this is just concerns about, for example, port shares, Rangiora Business Park. Some of these fundamental long-term investments should be protected for the community and for earnings into the future for the community and the ratepayers.
Councillor Grayling.
I actually think that Ken probably beat me to that question. I was just going to ask again about where in the consultation document, because we haven't actually discussed in the consultation document breaking up the intergenerational endowment fund or changing the mandate to grow the fund. And we've kept that quite specific that this is about how we use the dividends. So that's why I was just this is all about doing exactly what I understand you want to do, which is protect the fund, grow the fund, and keep that mandate, which is what we're actually consulting on. It's just the legal entities and structures to best deliver that and protect that. So that's where I was just probably like Ken, just asking where in the consultation document you got the sense that that's not what we were doing.
And I think because it wasn't quite clear, it was actually the word of mouth and the could be changing narrative in the process, which made me alarmed.
It might be the
more
word
than
of
anything
mouth,
else.
not the word in the document. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The unspoken.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. We appreciate your submission and your perspective, and all the best as you and your business partners enter the construction phase at Rangiora Business Park. Best of luck with that.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Can somebody pray for some fine weather?
Emma, would you like to join us? A change in the batting order, team. It's Emma then Alistair.
Sorry. Hi everyone. Heidi's here as also a long-term Clear the Air participant and my support person, because a lot of people around the table know me and they know how much I love public speaking. So yes, Chair McDonald, so wonderful to see you in the seat. And so the people who don't know Clear the Air, we've been working really closely with the Regional Council for many years now. We're part of the Working Party, which has been, we're a really mature group now that has been working really proactively with both councils, sometimes central government, and industry. And we're getting to the point where we're really starting to be really clear about what's going to be mutually beneficial to our city and our community. So We're really fortunate in our region, and we have some amazing assets and incredible levers to use. And one of the things that we have noticed and really talked a lot about in the Working Party is like there's been not a lot of connectivity with these assets and how they're used for the economic gain of the city. And we are an environmental group pushing for air quality. We've proven through data that we live in a polluted area with an airshed, focusing on one small part of the air landscape. But really, when it comes down to it, we're also really focused on a more holistic view of what solving for air pollution can actually be really economically beneficial to the city. And we've inherited, I'm talking about all of us, have inherited a city that has grown up around a port and a heavy industry. We're the fastest growing city. So we have this tension right now, but we also have the assets. We've got an amazing port. We've got some amazing industries. The problem is where they are. And so we have this asset, Rangiuru. One of the problems that over the years is it's never been clear. We've only just got to the point in the Working Party where it's, yes, Rangiuru is open for business and will take industry. We had the likes of Balance and Lauter and some of the asphalt companies saying, well, where can we go? And now it's clear that they can go there. If they're in a situation where they're looking to build a new factory or have to invest tens of millions of dollars, Rangiuru needs to be really viable for them. So what we also discovered was that there was a real disconnect in how the levers are being utilised, and I think that's the opportunity for the regional council. So really using, like you've been using the levers in terms of consenting process, and it costs a lot to monitor and costs a lot to then police the air pollution problems. It's costing more and more for industry to remain there. So we think that with Quayside and it should really be incentivising the relocation of some of these industries. We want to keep them in the region. So and we think that should be really part of the governance model going forward, that we should be able to make it beneficial for them to consider, and they are often asked to in the environmental courts to consider where else they can be. So this is so Rangiuru really needs to be with the rail enabled. And sorry, I'm rambling a bit here. We'll go to the next slide, maybe. Can you do that? Yeah, so well, the other thing we've asked for is really looking at the opportunity cost of a lot of the sites in the industrial area taken up by logs and containers, and it's really not the best use of our land. With a properly consented business park so close, there is that opportunity to free up land that is really in the centre of our city. And it would also, logs create a lot of problems with air pollution because there's a lot of debris that comes off them. And some of the other emitting industries would be like with the asphalt, and that would be able to operate more freely if they weren't in the polluted airsheds. So we believe that the missing link has really been the real mandate to work together with Quayside and the regional council and the industries to free up this land. Yes, there's another slide, I think. So, that's probably a bit wordy, but yeah, maybe I'll throw it open for questions at this point.
Thank you, Emma. Certainly. Councillors, just some questions. So Councillor Maltby. Councillor McCorkindale. Councillor McMillan. Councillor Maltby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a big area of industrial activity around the port, and it's a very, very important port for New Zealand's economy.
Absolutely, 100%.
And you need a certain amount of industry and service industry around that. Would you like to see everything move?
No, I've never, ever said that. Never, ever said
I mean, it is valuable. So what have you got specific industries that you would like to see move?
Are you aware of any of the work done with the Air Quality Working Party, just in terms of kind of identifying the heavy emitters, and are you over that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's certain industries that, so because of the location of them, and with the schools being downwind,
so that you've moved the pet food's moved.
Yeah,
but it's mainly the asphalt, is it, that you're concerned with?
Ziwi left due to their own economic decisions. If we had Rangiru up and running, they might have considered that. We might have been able to keep them in the region. But Ziwi were a success story in terms of their business, but not where they were located, because they made the lives of the people downwind from the meat rendering a misery. So our job is we're focused on a really like keeping industry, but unfortunately some of them are just in the wrong place. Asphalt companies should not be a few hundred meters upwind from our schools. Like you haven't dropped your kids off to Omanu Primary and just been engulfed in fumes from these factories. It's hideous. And that's why we started this. I mean, we've got councillors who live around the mount, they understand it. We've got Whareroa Marae surrounded by chemical factories. And the huge success story there with waste management voluntarily realising that they're just in the wrong place and have voluntarily managing their own retreat from being next to them. So Balance is no longer doing their sulfuric acid manufacturing plant, which we'd like to think is because of pressure from us, but it's just due to economics. There was never a margin in it. Manufacturing is suffering in New Zealand, everywhere in the world. Lauta is in a situation where they've got to invest tens of millions of dollars into their plant, which is very dated. They make some fantastic products. We'd love to see them be really successful, but their raw materials come from the mills. We've shut down the mills. So we've got to think past this really basic model of primary industry. We have to be freeing up these hundreds of hectares to then welcome new businesses at more rateable land. The port gets a wide berth. They've got the berthing rights, so there's a lot of land down there that's not rateable. Like we could be really looking at the economics behind that and saying, well, the port should be a really smooth running port. It is an asset and a jewel, but it could also be done a lot better. Do we need Hewlett's Road taken up by hectares of logs? That could be done out and rail enabled in, free up that land. What could go there? Gosh, lots of things that would employ more people. So you get what I'm saying.
Shall I let Councillor Corkindale ask her a question? We've got about 3 questions. I want to squeeze them all in for you, Emma. So yeah, Councillor Corkindale, then Councillor McMillan, and then Chair McDonald to finish. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you very much for your submission and your presentation. There are 2 parts to my question. So the first is, and it's around you're saying that we have an opportunity to use a lever to relocate industry from this existing airshed out to Rangiuru. The problem that I can see, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is that it would potentially be at the cost to the investment and then ultimately the cost to the ratepayer. So those properties are already for sale. They're on the market. If it was a viable move, it could be happening right now. Am I hearing from you that we should be subsidising that?
I wouldn't say subsidising, but incentivising. Well, not really. Like, there could be incentives. I don't know all the levers. I'm not on your side of the fence, but if you want to talk about subsidising, what are we doing at the moment? We're subsidising the port. Like, there's lots of non-rateable land, right? The berthing. So we're subsidising hundreds of a lot of space there. So I would say that incentivizing, like, there's a lot of, like, to be here, they pay a price. There's consenting, like really onerous consenting. There's environmental court cases all the time that we've all been on. So there are incentives to go there. Maybe the consenting process won't be there because they're not in a polluted airshed. So there are incentives to move there.
Thank you for your thoughts on that. So the second part of the question is, if those industries have created an airshed issue where they are now, and we move those industries to another place, are we not just exporting the issue instead of actually addressing the issue? Creating another issue in a different place?
That is a good question. The short answer is no, because it'll be a fit for purpose industrial zone. There'll be a lot of the manufacturing in the Mount, they're old factories. There's old, so they will be, if they are, say, relocating because they're looking to build a new factory, it'll be state of the art. And it'll be a lot cleaner. There's a lot of unsealed yards and things like that here. So the logs, say we're talking about the logs, they would be ideally, they would build, perhaps debarking or enclosed areas where that could be done. So, and also they won't be building houses or in schools right there because it's a fit for purpose zone. So,
thank you for sharing your thoughts on those questions. Thank you.
Councillor McMillan, then final question.
Oh, thanks, Emma. I'm just keen for you to sort of summarise your vision. So in my mind, you're what you're seeking and what you're seeing in your mind's eye is Rangiuru as a kind of dry dock with logs and containers there with the rail spur, and then the 38 hectares of log and container storage that's down in what you describe as sort of prime real estate waterfront. Suddenly not having those containers and logs because they're at the dry dock there. What's the vision that you have with that sort of in mind, and some of the heavy industry relocated out there? What would the impact be on Mount Maunganui? Like, what would that picture look like in a nutshell?
Well, it'd be transformative. I think there's so many opportunities. We had Chris talking about, or the other speakers talking about the incredible opportunities we have. We've got tourism, we've got elite sports, we've got biodiversity, there's just so many potential options to encourage new industry to come in. So I think, there's a lot of ideas there, but I see that cities evolve, and we're really at a point now. We can't just double down on having a port that is. There's just not enough space. Like, we're just going to have too many people, one road. We just we need to kind of rethink and act right now on it, and we've got the levers to do it. So
I'll have one more question from Chair McDonald, and then I will allow two extra quick questions from Councillor Kumar and Councillor Shirley.
Just very quickly, I don't really have any questions, but I do want to thank you for the submission, and particularly your submission around health statistics. I have been sitting at this table for as many years as we've been sitting in the working group, and this is actually my first time I've seen some form of statistic, and I want to reiterate it. And I want to found that the air pollution and airshed contributes to an estimated 13 premature deaths per year, with a social cost of 22 million annual from additional deaths and hospitalizations. I have been sitting at this table and hammering around this table about my concern about the health and well-being of people who live within the vicinity of this airshed. The other one I want to just correct you on, and that was Whareroa is in the wrong place. Whareroa is not in the wrong
Sorry,
place.
that was, no.
Industry came up around Whareroa, and so, you know, Whareroa was there originally before the port, before all these industries that came in. So, you know, it's just, it's come to pass that they're being subjected, they have been subjected over the years of the occupation of that industrial area. So as I said, thank you for that information. I have no questions. I think what you provided in your submission has given enough for us to discuss through our deliberations. I want to congratulate you on the passion that you have maintained to keep up what you're doing, and I want you to carry on with what you're doing, because I'm totally supportive. Around the relocation of the industries to Rangiuru Business Park, very similar to what was raised by Councillor McCorkindale. Are we shifting one nightmare to another? But I hear you loud and clear. And I think in our role in the Rangiuru Business Park, if there was to be relocation, obviously there would have to be conditions, and it would have to be clean industry. So it may well be that those industries have to be more cleaning up of what they're emitting if that relocation is to be done at Rangiuru Business Park. But thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kumar's yielded his question, so Councillor Shirley.
Mine's really a follow-up question to Chair McDonald, and that is your advocacy for the relocation of some of these troublesome industries to Rangiuru Business Park. Are you aware of the long-term planning proposals with smart growth and the Western Bay District Council's aspirations of a 15,000 plus new town, Kayunga, immediately adjacent to the Rangiuru Industrial Park or Business Park?
Yeah, well, this has been addressed before, and it's like, well, what's the point? This land was purchased a couple of decades ago with the view of it being like safeguarding the industry in the area. And then you've got the opportunity to correct the situation in Mount Maunganui. Why would you do it again? It just needs to be like a properly buffered industrial zone. It's not that hard to do, right? So you can have the best of both worlds. It's just good planning. So what are you saying, that we should continue being subjected to industrial discharges because of past?
I'm not saying that, no.
Yeah, so we could do it right. Yeah.
Thank you, Emma. Appreciate your work, and thank you, Heidi, for staying on. Appreciate that. Thank you.
You didn't get your say. You did very, very well.
Alistair, please come forward. Of course, we've saved the best to last.
Of course.
So,
And Steve Napier as well.
Kia ora, Steve, welcome.
Kia ora koutou, ko Te Chief Executive of Bay Trust, ko Alistair Rose tōku ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou katoa. And I do want to acknowledge the chair and the councillors here today, and the time you've given us to present on this, really important, investment decision that we're looking to make. And I do also want to acknowledge the bravery of this council. I've been in this role 10 years. And there's always been questions and concerns about what is our regional investment strategy? What is our trust structure? How are we going to work through this? So I do commend the bravery, because it's really easy, I think, in central government and local government to keep with the status quo. And I think it's really brave to go actually out there and consult on this in terms of what's in the best long-term interests of our community. So I just want to acknowledge that as well. Also want to introduce Steve Napier. So Steve Napier is one of our long-serving trustees. He's been with us for kind of pretty much 10 years at the Trust. He's our investment committee chair and recently appointed onto the Acorn Investment Committee and the Acorn board at the same time. So if you've got any hard investment questions, you can ask Steve rather than myself. Look, I take it you've all received our written submission. I take it you've read every single line of all those 280 odd submissions. So I'm not going to go through our submission in kind of detail. I'm just going to touch on some of those key kind of highlight points and leave hopefully plenty of time for those hard questions at the end. I also note that we're going to really focus here on topic 1, just due to time constraints, but we have actually submitted on topic 2 and topic 3 of that consultation document at the same time. So as far as I can recall in our 35-year odd history at Bay Trust, this is the first time Bay Trust has ever verbally presented on one of our 7 councils in our region long-term plans. And so that just really does emphasise the importance that we think of this decision that you guys are going to make in the kind of coming months. We fundamentally, and we've discussed it at the board level, believe that this is one of the biggest decisions the regional council is going to make and one of the biggest, most impactful decisions for our community as well. And that's why we wanted to present verbally. A little bit of brief context around Bay Trust for those that don't know us. We were set up in 1988 to hold the shares of the Trust Bank Group. 7 years later, we decided at that time to sell those shares, and basically those $89 million, we sold them to effectively Westpac, and they were put into a diversified investment portfolio to benefit our communities. So currently, and over the last 35 years, we've invested in international, national, and local impactful kind of projects. So our investment funds, effectively what we're trying to do over that 35-year period is grow those investments in alignment with inflation and to some extent population kind of growth at the same time. So we want to be the same size in real dollars today as we were 35 years ago, so we can kind of make the same size impact. And we've achieved that. So our investment funds are now worth $290 million as of kind of today. And we've grown at a rate of about 3 or 4% a year. At the same time, we've been distributing about 3 or 4% a year back into our communities. So we've distributed $120 million of grants into our communities over that time. And that's for us to get that intergenerational fairness as growing our investments in alignment with inflation, and the returns, excess returns we get in above that, we grant back into our community. So we're really fortunate in the Bay of Plenty to also have other foundation endowments that operate in the sector. So we've been working collectively with Trust Horizon, TECT, Acorn, and Rotorua Trust and agree on these kind of collective principles that we're going to individually submit on today. Also, in terms of Bay Trust, I think I just want to kind of note that we are in a really privileged position. We operate under the Community Trust Act. That means ourselves and the 11 other banking kind of trusts that were, came out of the banking deregulation days are deemed to be tax exempt and charitable in everything we do. So we could buy and sell used cars. We're still going to be kind of tax exempt. The other thing is that Act codifies our purpose, and it's a very broad purpose. So our purpose of our fund is for any charitable, cultural, philanthropic, recreational, or any other purposes. So it's a very broad purpose. And we've found over the last 35 years, it's really important to have a very broad purpose because our community needs always change. What were our needs 35 years ago? Very different than they are today. What our needs are today from our communities in terms of what we want to grant into are going to be very different in 10 or 20 years in the future as well. So having a very broad-based, trust, deed and purpose is important as well. So in terms of our collective kind of individual submission that we've collectively agreed on, just want to highlight 3 points in that submission. First of all, clarity of purpose, I think, is one of the most fundamental drivers of success for an international endowment investment fund, which we're talking about today. And I think over the last 10 or so years that I've been in my role, I think the regional council has struggled to clarify what the purpose of these investments actually are. Are we just growing a bigger and bigger investment fund? What is the purpose of that kind of growth? How are we going to distribute and spend that money? So when we work through the consultation document, we broadly support those 3 purposes that were outlined in the consultation document. But we would really encourage the council to think about keeping that purpose as broad as possible, because what we might think a community needs now are likely to be very different in the future as well. So broadly support the purposes, but think you should actually look to keep it broad, something like what we've got in Bay Trust, so you can adapt and change things over time. Then once you've got the purpose sorted out, which is effectively like your strategy, the next thing is to also have the right organisation structure in place to support that purpose. And we do inherently believe that the direction of travel the regional council is heading in, which is towards a trust-based structure, is the right long-term structure for an perpetual endowment investment fund. And there's 2 or 3 reasons associated with that. One is if you get the right structure and achieve tax exempt status, then there's a huge amount of tax efficiencies to be gained, which is a material benefit for our kind of community. The secondly, a trust-based structure set up right is a lot more difficult to kind of unwind in the future, and it does create a lot more protection for this really important regional investment kind of asset and the ability to kind of keep it together in the future, particularly with local government reforms coming up at us as well. So a protective structure which is codified in the trust deed, we think is really well suited as well. The other thing in terms of trusts, under the Trust Act and under trust law, you've effectively got to treat all your beneficiaries equitably. So that means when you're distributing the dividends or the returns on this fund, you have to think, are we distributing it fairly and equitably across our communities, across the outcome areas we're trying to target? And most importantly, one of the important things is, are we being intergenerationally fair between the current generation and the future generations as well? So I'm going to just touch on that point because I think it's a bit more, it's really important in a little bit more detail now. So when we look at across nationally, the leading funds in New Zealand, but also internationally, generally most funds will distribute around 4 to 5% of their investment base each year out to their communities, out to their kind of beneficiaries. That's very similar to what ourselves does, Tech does, Rotorua Trust does. When we look at currently what's happening with your regional investment fund, we understand that if that $3 billion investment fund, that around $50 million is distributed back each year, which is about a 1.5% distribution rate. When you kind of look through that, it means that we are actively disadvantaging our current communities and our current beneficiaries for the purpose of building up a future investment fund for some reason in the future. And we believe a trust-based structure, because under trust law and under the Trust Act, you have to think about current beneficiaries and future beneficiaries and treat them right. It means you create a structure where you're going, we want to distribute about 4% of our investment funds each year. We want to grow our investment funds still at a rate of 3 or 4% a year to cover inflation and maybe some population growth and some buffer. But that means that instead of 50 or 60 million, you're talking about distributing another distributing about 120, $130 million a year through the regional council out of the community, which we think a trust-based structure really kind of supports. As part of that, in terms of being able to achieve that, we think it's really important to have flexibility around that port investment. At the moment, we completely agree with the regional council. It is a key strategic asset for our community, but the port based here. But the port is also inherently cannot be actually moved. It's a strategic asset. All the research and evidence we've seen, commercially run, owned and operated ports achieve just as good financial performance as government-owned ports. In fact, generally they achieve superior financial investment. So what is it that's keeping us wedded to actually owning that kind of port? If you free up some of those constraints, then you can distribute more of that 4% back a year into the community. Also, having all of our, most of our investment funds, most of that $3 billion funds tied up into the port, it creates massive concentration risk from an investment perspective. What happens if there's a tsunami? What happens if China or the US don't want to take our exports anymore? So we've got a huge amount of risk sitting in this kind of port share at the moment. And that's why we did support, the sell down of that stake, but also long term, we'd really sort of suggest, have a look actually, does this regional council still need to own the port long term in the future as well? So lastly, we do also believe option 4 should be continued to be explored if options 2 and 3 look too challenging. And Bay Trust, we've got an open door, very open to have any discussions around option 4 as well. So in summary and conclusion, and I do talk fast, but trying to get through this, the collective kind of trusts do support the concept of, that clarity of the purpose that you've got in your consultation document, but keeping it as wide as you possibly can, moving to a more trust-based structure, which has that protection and everything built into that structure. As part of that, really challenging how much we're distributing back to the current generations in our community, lifting that to around a 4% kind of rate. And we all really collectively kind of support that. And so unless Steve's got anything to add, that's a really kind of concise summary of our written submissions, and really open the floor to ask questions now, but also open door after these sessions as well.
Alistair and Steve, thank you. Councillors, questions? Yeah, Councillor Maltby, Councillor McMillan.
Oh, there's a
Councillor
few.
Crosby,
I'm feeling
Councillor
scared. I might have a drink of water.
Everyone. Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions. First one, if you use the trust structure, could you just move Quayside straight and transfer the Quayside shares into a trust and leave Quayside essentially as it is inside the trust?
Look, we didn't want to get into kind of the legal and accounting implications of doing all that. We deliberately stayed away from that because we know the regional council is probably, getting the best possible kind of legal advice and everything around it associated with that. But there's nothing legally there's nothing that would stop you moving the entity as it is today into a trust-based structure. There's nothing to stop you going, the Quayside board could still be the investment committee of that kind of trust-based structure. The regional councils could, to some extent, have be appointed onto that kind of trust board as being your trustees. So that's all been done in numerous iterations out there before, but we didn't want to go into the legal kind of details of that.
Question 2 is just a bit of clarity about how your board members and trustees are selected.
Yeah, so our board, so we came out of the banking regulation days. So the Minister of Finance actually settled our trust. And so Cabinet actually appoints our trustees. But what we've got in terms of our trustees is a very strong appointment kind of process. And so our trustee at the moment says we must have sufficient trustees that whakapapa Māori. We must have sufficient trustees that represent the diversity of our community. We must have sufficient trustees that have sufficient institutional investment knowledge. We must have sufficient trustees that have the right governance knowledge to manage an intergenerational investment fund. So they can't just appoint 10 80-year-old dairy farmers from Te Puke onto our trust. So when you look at our trustees at the moment, we've got 50% that whakapapa Māori, probably 50% female. We've got 2 to 3 with institutional investment kind of experience on that. And so what we've seen since we introduced that change in our trustee 5 years ago, now we've got a really great group of trustees that actually can manage an international.
So there's no elected members?
No elected members, but there's other trusts that do have elected members. So Rotorua Trust and TECT have elected members. Trust Horizon has a combination of elected members and appointed members. They get some that are elected.
So I was more worrying about your trust. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McMillan.
Thanks, Al and Steve. So if you had a magic wand, would you seek approval to further divest the port shares down to something like 2.5%? Or what's your thoughts there? Because 28% is still quite a lot of port shares.
I think I don't agree with everything Wayne Brown does, but I think what he's done in terms of the Auckland Airport shares and everything makes a lot of logical sense. I come back to it. Yeah, this is a fantastic strategic asset for our region. It's kind of, fulfilled a lot of growth ambitions in the region, but actually when I look forward, if I was actually having this as my own investment portfolio, would I want to have all my investments tied up in one asset? If I was going to have a port exposure, I'd have it in the 10 best performing ports all around the world to have that diversification in case something happens there. I also think as a regulator, it makes a lot more sense to not own one of your biggest challenging issues in this region, which we've just heard from the past submitters. And, I do live in the Mount Maunganui kind of airshed. There is some significant challenges there. So I think it actually makes perfect sense going, this is always going to be a strategic asset. This is always going to be the most successful port in New Zealand. There's plenty of commercial owners and operators that will make it just as successful as it is today, and probably more, because it'll lower their cost of capital and they'll have more commercial rigor into those decisions as well. So yes, I would sell it down further. That's personally not by trust, but Steve probably agrees.
Councillor Crosby.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. Noting the port's a listed company and disclosure and all those things. I want to thank you. You're the only submission that's made that honest connection. Everybody else has danced around it, but you've come here with absolute clarity about what's been one of our biggest challenges, being a CCO in the first instance. And the port is, a strategic asset, and we went through a lot of consultation in 2024 around that, and that council made a decision. I obviously got a conflict of interest, but thank you for at least the openness and the honesty and the clarity of Bay Trust submission. As I said, you're the only submission that's actually addressed that issue.
Councillor McCorkindale.
Thank you guys for your presentation and your submission. Lovely to see you again, Steve. That's very cool. So my question for you guys is specifically around protection of the investment. So really welcome the advice around moving to a trust structure, and just wondered if you'd turned your thoughts to the ring fencing. So if it went into a trust and then additional ring fencing, I couldn't see anything in the submission, but I just wondered if you'd had any thoughts around that. If it was if you thought it was a required next step, or did you think that the trust would actually afford us enough protection?
Can you just talk me through that in a bit more detail?
So the legislative ring fencing is like the piece of legislation that protects the Auckland Futures Fund.
Yeah, so there are good examples out there. Yeah, as you said, the Auckland Futures Fund, the New Plymouth, whatever the fund is down there. The Community Trust Act effectively does the same kind of protection as well. It does add an added layer of kind of protection into that kind of model compared to a normal kind of trust-based kind of structure. But, you know, I kind of feel like, you know, it'd be very challenging for someone to try and unwind the whole trust-based kind of structure in terms of trust law, common law, where it's come from. You know, it'd actually have to be a very political reason to do that. So I think it does add kind of added kind of protection in terms of that. Maybe it makes it easier in terms of clarity around the tax exempt status and how you can have a really broad purpose. Like I said, we can buy and sell used cars and we're always going to be tax exempt. We don't have to actually comply with the charitable kind of act or anything like that. So there are kind of additional kind of benefits associated with that. But I don't think it would stop me kind of still recommending that. Even in spite of those, I'd still be recommending to move to that kind of trust-based structure.
Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Alistair and Steve, for coming and talking to us today. My question was about the impact investing and thinking about the distribution side, because it sort of sits between both investment and distribution, and how you think about that and how you frame it. So how you decide how much you're going to put into impact investing, and do you think about that as a distribution primarily rather than a investment?
But yeah, it's definitely been a journey that we've been on. We've been on that journey for the last kind of 10 years and deliberately been on a kind of slow, steady progression of that kind of journey. So when we first started off on that journey, we had a small allocation of 2% of our investment base so impact investments are where we're looking to. Most of our investments are kind of offshore, which are, you know, probably 80% offshore, 20% in New Zealand, and most of that is generally spread all around New Zealand. But we wanted to also, because ultimately, your trust purpose is, you know, what you're there to achieve. Your trust purpose isn't growing a bigger and bigger investment pool or fund. And when I I was thinking about that when I first started at Bay Trust, right? We will look through our investments and we're investing in tobacco companies, yet we're supporting with our distributions, you know, anti-smoking kind of groups. So that just did not make sense. So where things are moving to and evolving is a lot of foundation endowments are applying an impact lens across their whole portfolio and going, rather than just look at risk return, we also look at impact. And, you know, if you think about the big Australian superannuation funds, they're going, we need to have to consider our 2 million beneficiaries in this. What is the impact of our investments on this? But we started in terms of our local investments at a 2% investment of our investment base. That's not big enough to materially change the risk and return of your overall investment portfolio. And we gradually grew that over time as we got more experience, you know, trustees with, you know, investment background, as we got a more experience with kind of staff. And we've ended up just signing off on our 2030, which is our long-term strategy, which will be a 15% allocation of our investment base to local impactful opportunities. Increasingly, that will be through funds rather than doing it ourselves, because that just de-risks it for us. But that's what we think is our right long-term home. We don't want to have we don't want that to materially or meaningfully impact the return of our overall kind of investment portfolio. And in fact, actually, if you're doing too much in terms of concessionary returns, how are you going to sell that investment on to someone else? And it's going to compromise your overall investment portfolio. So most of our impact investments now have really good positive impact, really good risk and return metrics, because you need that to attract more kind of capital into that space. And so, yeah, we've done a lot of kind of work on that and very kind of happy to share more details. We've got plenty of policies and had external peer reviews on that as well. Yeah.
When you get it, sorry. A good example of an impact investment that is also commercial is the
because the problem is, Kate, if you have too much concession in terms of the return, how do you ever sell that investment to someone else? How do you make actually the system change impact? Like, we could do a really concessionary housing investment at a 3% return, but we've only got a certain limited amount of money to do that. For, you know, philanthropy only is a certain limited amount of money. Where there's big pools of untapped capital is in the KiwiSaver balances. We've got 130 billion sitting in that. They're never going to be attracted to it unless there's a commercial return. But as I said, it's increasingly, you know, sophistication in this market is applying an impact lens when you make any investment decision.
be really clear, when you say to 2030, you're going to increase up to 15% allocation of your investment, you're talking about your distribution or your,
No,
or your
investment.
actual investment, your
So-
baseline investment?
Yeah, so of our
Cool.
roughly $300 million, 15% or 45 million
Yeah.
will be allocated there.
Yeah.
And that will really strongly align kind of to our kind of purpose at the same time.
Thank you.
Alistair and Steve, thank you very much for your submission. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for, and thank you for accommodating the change in batting order as well. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
And commend you for the whole process and
Yeah.
very
Thank
well
you.
done.
Yeah, I do think the process has been handled really well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. So to Councillor Kumar, I apologise. We've not made 6 o'clock. I've underperformed and we've finished 5 hours early. So thank you to all the submitters today, to all the public online, Councillor Campbell online, to our Bay of Plenty Regional Council staff, and to you as councillors. Thank you for today's work. The hearing will now adjourn and will reconvene at 10:30 a.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of April, that's tomorrow, at the Regional Council chambers.